So I'd like to talk a little bit about where we've been in 2022, as well as where we're headed moving forward. It might help for some of you in the room if I provide just a little bit of context. So some of you have seen this slide or similar slides in the past, but hopefully you've forgotten anything that you may have seen in the past. So eHealth Exchange is different. We have deep roots with the federal agencies, where there's an expectation by many of our participants and the community that we operate with the same level of integrity as the federal agencies. And for that reason, we're really focused on trust. In fact, sometimes we are fixated on trust. And we consider ourselves to be a guardian of patient privacies, and you'll see some decisions that are largely based on that as we talk about how we're looking to formulate our TEFCA QHIN approach. I think most importantly, we're a network of networks. So we have these state and regional HIEs, 61 that are part of our community. And they are really the bread and butter of data exchange across the U.S. Some folks believe that given the rise and the maturity of the vendor-owned EHRs, that there isn't as much of a place for the HIEs. But these state HIEs are the boots on the ground. They're the ones approaching the critical access hospitals. They're the ones approaching the small physician practices on older EHRs. And they make the connectivity that the national networks don't have time to make. They also provide services that we don't provide. So they provide the encounter notification services and analytics and connectivity with state public health organizations that the national organizations or national networks just don't have time to focus on. So we love the idea that we are able to supplement what the state and regional HIEs do by giving them a national connectivity approach. So they exchange within their region or within their state, and then when they have patients going to centers of excellence or get injured or sick during traveling, we help them with that. Another thing that makes us different is our approach that I mentioned on trust. So again, because we were founded by federal agencies as well as a number of others, there is that expectation that we operate with a super high level integrity. And that doesn't always make things happen fast, but it makes things happen well. We operate on a pass-through basis, which many HIEs do, but we love that approach for a number of reasons. In a perfect world, it would be great to have a longitudinal patient record for each patient, but that's something that many of the state and regional HIEs have already accommodated. And there are some benefits. So we are much less attractive to cyber criminals because we don't have that centralized repository. All right, so as Matt highlighted and showed a similar slide, we currently have 14 billion transactions going through our gateway, which we call the hub, a year. The vast majority of those transactions are query and retrieve via the traditional IHE SOAP profiles. But thanks to the FDA, we are also beginning a FHIR journey. And this year we went live with a new FHIR component to the eHealth Exchange hub. And that operates bidirectionally. So at a minimum, the FDA is able to query our participants via FHIR R4. And then some of those organizations are able to submit notifications to the FDA. They do not have to be via FHIR, but that is one approach that we happen to like. And then of course, we have the push notifications. So sometimes this is providers sending encounter data to their HIE, their state or local HIE. So this is where every time there's an encounter, a provider pushes the notification to the HIE so the HIE can build their longitudinal patient record. So 2022 was jam-packed. So above and beyond increasing our adoption of existing use cases on all fronts, we were lucky in that we were able to implement that new fire solution, and we were able to become certified both in high trust as well as with NIST cybersecurity. All right, so we added 22 participants to get up to 327 total participants. And again, this might be federal agencies, it might be state and regional HIEs, health systems, or ambulatory provider groups, which are growing. And then we've got our 62 state and regional HIEs. And I think we've done a nice job this year of building those relationships and talking to them about how they can become better involved in TEFCA. Above and beyond the existing solutions that we had, that we tried to get better adoption for in 2022, we introduced those new solutions. So a bidirectional fire exchange, as well as enhancements to the dashboard. So if you're not sure what the dashboard is, it's a web-based portal that gives you some insights into what you're doing for exchange. Who are you exchanging with? What's the response time? Who's querying you and why? As well as some surprisingly insightful insights regarding where your clinicians are pulling data from, why, and how long the other trading partners take to respond to your requests. And so if you visit the Ask the Expert booth out there, they'd be happy to give you a demo today and make sure that you have credentials to log on and all that good stuff. We do need your help, though. There are a number of eHealth Exchange participants who are not taking advantage of all of the services that we do offer. If you're friendly with other eHealth Exchange participants, it might be worth a comment, asking, are they currently submitting electronic case reports via eHealth Exchange? That's something we do not only for eHealth Exchange participants, but we do it for other carry quality networks for free. And that's because we think it's so important that public health authorities across the US get the information they need, either for a current pandemic or for a different public health issue. We would also love to have many more organizations exchange in our fire solution. So we've recently opened up a program where we are waiving annual fees for the first 15 eHealth Exchange participants who successfully connect to the FDA via Fire R4 by the end of March 31st. So if you're looking to get your fees waived and you're looking to get experience with Fire R4, this is a great way to do it, and you want to do it by March 31st. Another thing that we could use help with is production content testing. So we have one, maybe two organizations who appear to be ready to move forward with production content validation. So eHealth Exchange, as Matt mentioned, has gone out of its way to get 98% of our participants to test to make sure that the data they exchange meets conformance standards. So the required fields are there, the data is stored in the right place, and there's appropriate terminology. So LOINC codes for labs, and RX norm codes for medications. But we also now want to take that next step forward and make sure that the data moving across in a live or production environment is also of that high quality caliber. And so we're asking people to use the eHealth Exchange testing tools to validate that the data they're retrieving from other participants meets the current standards. So if anyone has interested in moving forward with that, that's something the Ask the Expert booth can get you signed up for, or at least schedule an introductory meeting to talk about it. Let's see. Yeah, let me cover this really quickly and see if I remember the entire use case here. It's my understanding, as I remember it, that hospitals need to notify the VA of a hospitalization or an encounter, at least for emergency services. At the same time, these hospitals do not have a roster of who's a vet. And so one thing that we think can help these hospitals and their state and regional HIEs is if they send a notification to the VA to determine if the patient is in fact a vet, and then they can provide a notification that there has been an encounter. And so the way that this would work, and I'm not sure if we have anyone doing this yet or not, but the way that this would work is the community hospitals, the academic hospitals, whomever, the non-VA hospitals, send an HL7V V2 ADT message, or however they communicate with their state HIE, and they say, hey, do you have patient Dave Castle? And the state or regional HIE forwards that to the VA as an XCPD, a patient discovery request. If the VA responds back with, yes, we have that patient, that means that infers that the patient is a vet. And that can trigger the HIE to send a direct secure message notification to the VA saying, hey, this patient was in our emergency department, and we're hoping to get reimbursed when we submit a bill. So that's big for the hospitals to go ahead and get reimbursed from the VA, and we're hoping that it simplifies the current process they have where they might not be being reimbursed. I'm going to leave some definite time for questions, but I want to talk about our FHIR approach. And if I can't answer any of the questions during the Q&A, we have some other folks here who are better equipped to get into those detailed questions. But the bottom line is we've introduced an intermediary. We've introduced the eHealth Exchange Hub with a FHIR proxy service. So, and this provides a number of benefits. First of all, for those of you who don't remember, FHIR has definite appeals. Some of the appeals relate around the fact that you can request data for a specific class of data. So you might say, I don't want a 200-page CCDA. You might say, I just want medications, or I just want lab results, or I just want comorbidities. And so, so our initiators, like the FDA, are able to submit a single request to the eHealth Exchange saying, hey, do you have patient so-and-so? And eHealth Exchange is in effect able to fan that out. So we're able to send that to multiple responders, and we're able to accommodate any variations that the responders have and how they've interpreted the FHIR specifications, primarily around security. So whoever's requesting the data doesn't have to know how 200, 300, whatever responders are going to require the request to be formatted. So that one-to-many concept is powerful in and of itself. Another thing that we're able to do is we're able to bundle together the responses. So a number of EHR vendors are only able to process one FHIR resource at a time. So you might say, hey, I want data for patient J. Nakashima, and that's great. But the responder is only able to provide back, in many cases, medications. And what if you want a huge chunk of the patient record? What if you want medications, lab results, comorbidities, vital signs, other observations? The eHealth Exchange Hub is able to, in effect, cache the request and fan it out and send it iteratively until it gets all the resources back. So once it has, in that example, the problems, the allergies, the medications, the immunizations, it's able to bundle the response and send back to the FDA all of that data at once, instead of receiving it 16 to 20 times and then having to piece it back together. All right, and finally our roadmap. This is for 2023, and as with all recent years in interoperability, we are saving some of our capacity for market disruptions. So it's great to be able to plan for 12 months, but the unexpected does happen and we might have to shift gears. The first thing that we're looking to do is to continue on our commitment to TEFCA. So we, you've all seen that probably that we have signaled our intent to apply to become a QHIN, and we have in fact applied, but we're waiting to hear back. But once we do hear back, there are a number of things that we need to do. We need to ask our participants who wants to become part of that eHealth Exchange QHIN. And of course, a large number of those are going to say, I already have a QHIN solution from my EHR vendor. And I think in the vast majority of cases, it's going to make sense for them to go with their native solution. So if they have EHR XYZ and their EHR vendor is planning to become a QHIN, it's probably going to be natural and easy for them to go that route. But we've got to see who's in and who's out. We have to publish our flow-down provisions, and these are much more comprehensive than they were when we joined with Care Equality. We have to I can't think of a better word, so I'll just say it. We have to kind of regurgitate a lot of the TEFCA terms in our flow-down requirements to our QHIN participants and sub-participants. I would guess that we will be that eHealth Exchange and a number of other QHINs are going to be going live in 2023. I think the RCE still has to put out a directory, but I can't imagine that's going to take very long. And I would guess that we will go live with at least treatment requests and individual access. Above and beyond that, the RCE and ONC have signaled that there are going to be additional use cases or purposes of use that are permitted on day one, but required at some point in the future. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if the government benefits determination purpose of use is required later in 2023. But I don't know, that's just my speculation. We've publicly heard that the RCE is looking to publish an SOP on healthcare operations, and I believe also on payment. So that will give us some guidance in how we can hopefully make those two purposes of use and their corresponding use cases much more widely adopted, since right now, frankly, there's just a dismal amount of traffic across the US in all networks for healthcare operations and payment. And then there's public health. We're finally coming out of a major, major pandemic, and it's astounding how little we've accomplished on that front as a nation, all networks. And a lot of that's due to policy constraints. So I'm hopeful that ONC and the RCE are able to clear some of those barriers and make it so that public exchange for the public health purpose of use is much more widespread. I think we currently have something like 30 of our participants signaling interest to implement FHIR R4 by the end of May. We'll see what that number really turns out to be, but that's super impressive. That said, we still have another 300 participants that we need to convince to exchange via FHIR And a lot of that's going to be timing. They have other priorities, and they're short on resources, and they're worried about, they want to better understand the policy implications. But we hope to really get that adoption sky high in 2023. And above and beyond the ability for the FDA to pull data from these healthcare organizations, there's also the strong need for the FDA to be notified electronically via a push notification that there has been some sort of an adverse event that the FDA might want to look into. And again, that may or may not be via FHIR. We've partnered with Lantana and CDC to hopefully become a participant. And the CDC's goal right now is to retrieve data via FHIR R4 for quality measures. So they have a couple of use cases off the top of my head, or at least one is, they need to know about NICU babies. How many NICU babies have developed a bloodstream infection and were prescribed XYZ antimicrobial in the NICU? And that's something they would love to be able to pull. And luckily, they want to do it, FDA or CDC wants to do it via the FHIR bulk query or population level. So instead of saying, hey, I've got a baby John Smith here, they want to be able to say, hey, give me all your babies in a certain time frame that had this bloodstream infection. And so I think that population level exchange will be super, super powerful. I'm not sure at what point the RCE and ONC are going to expect TEFCA exchange via FHIR, but they have published a draft roadmap, and so we'll see how that goes. All right, the directory. The topic often bores me to tears, but this year there's some meat to it. So number one, we're upgrading our directory, which I think was originally at the Argonaut level back in 2017, and we're upgrading it to FHIR R4. So this way, our participants can populate it and exchange their directory information using FHIR R4. And we plan to retire our legacy UDI directory so that we can just do FHIR for the directory exchange. And this is also going to require that many of our participants, at a minimum those who exchange in TEFCA, to populate their sub-participant data. So you might have, I'll make one up, Mayo Clinic. Right now we may have that the Mayo Clinic mothership is part of our network, but we haven't detailed the fact that they operate in 7 states and they have, 70 hospitals, X number of urgent care centers, X number of lab draw sites, and so on and so forth. So that will be really exciting as we begin to populate the directory. And that is a TEFCA requirement that could someday become an eHealth exchange requirement as well for our participants who are not exchanging with TEFCA through eHealth exchange. And finally, content quality. I already touched on this, but we're really looking to move from validation testing to production testing and make sure that data in the real world is actively exchanged. So, what questions, comments, concerns do folks have? I think we have at least one person with a microphone who's going to try to sprint in your direction if you have any questions.
Hey Jay, this is Arun from Davita. Hey, if you go back to your roadmap, I was just wondering what is your perspective on how you would prioritize those 5 things?
Oh, great question. I should have clarified that these are not in chronological order. And the primary reason for this is that the RCE's timing for TEFCA-related activity is not fully known. But if I were to just kind of eyeball some of these, I would say the directory work is definitely in the first quarter, January, February. I think my memory tells me that we're looking to sunset the legacy UDI directory in the summertime. Responses to individuals is required 6 months after XYZ date. Steve Gravely will get into that in a moment. So that's going to happen definitely, I believe, in the first half of the year. And content quality, I'm unfortunately not able to come up with a very specific timeline for that, but it's going to be whenever the 1 or 2 participants who have expressed interest are ready to go. And of course, they're going to have to staff up and decide, well, once we get this information and we see that another participant might not be always submitting the highest quality of data, what do we do about it? Any other questions?
Hi, Jocelyn Keegan. I work for Point of Care Partners, and I support the Da Vinci Project, and colleagues of mine support FAST. Super excited. I've actually spent 3 days with you guys now, just getting up to speed and learning where you're at. As we move to FHIR and look at the actual use cases that people are going to use between partners, I'd love to figure out a way for us to better help people understand the guides that are already out there to get to that specificity that you're talking about. So I guess my question is, for somebody who's sort of outside and following, what's the best way to help build awareness of the fact that there's work in progress point to point that could be so powerful if we could expand it to the network?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. I don't have an immediate response. I think the eHealth Exchange could do a better job of publicizing the benefits of the proxy service, the one-to-many concept. We have been asking ONC and the RCE to incorporate in their future plans. I don't know, does anyone else from the eHealth Exchange staff have a thought?
I think the other thing was just to start out with like the FTA use case, which is, you know, getting at that exact type of a concept, and then move into some of the more, you know, payer-focused exchanges. But as a way to stepping stone into it, that was kind of the idea. The technology should be quite similar. It's just a matter of kind of getting it started with something that's more of a public health-centric thing. But that was the idea anyway.
That makes sense.